Joining us now from Doral. David, obviously we're seeing the Latin American leaders coming out. What else can you tell us?
Well, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, War Secretary, and others are in the room right now as we await President Trump. He's in another room right now, as you can see on the screen, taking those photos with some of those leaders. So this is the Shield of the Americas, several different countries. We have a map, if we can put up the map, that shows where these countries are being represented today, from Argentina to Bolivia to Trinidad and Tobago to the Dominican Republic, really all over. But it's notable that we're not seeing the leaders, President Sheinbaum of Mexico not here today. Also, the leader of Cuba not here. We didn't expect the leader of Cuba to be here, but Cuba has been in talks recently and on the forefront recently of President Trump's mind. He's been busy clearly with what's going on in Iran, but recently he's been telling reporters and news outlets that Cuba is something else that he is looking at. So he's going to be out here just any moment. And then after this, he's going to fly to Dover, Delaware today to honor those 6 fallen service members in this war with Iran that were attacked by Iran. If we could put up, I think it's important to put up an image showing them. I want to read their names. And President Trump, we assume the War Secretary Hegseth will also honor them. Captain Cody Cork, Sergeant First Class Noah Teachins, Sergeant First Class Nicole Armour, Specialist Declan Cody, Major Jeffrey O'Brien, and Chief Warrant Officer Robert Marzon. So after the president leaves here at the Shield of the Americas, he will travel to Dover, Delaware to honor those service members, those fallen service members during that dignified transfer ceremony, then come back down here later. But this is an important moment for the United States, and this focuses on cartels, drug cartels, also just general security here in the Western Hemisphere. Guys.
Thank you, David. Well, let's bring in Kayleigh McEnany. I think, Kayleigh, this is, I've been saying, this is, in a lot of people's mind, this pivot towards our hemisphere, towards security here, towards getting out the Chinese and becoming better partners with all of these countries, who many of them, not because they wanted to, but only because of our own neglect, we're starting to make deals with China. And now President Trump kicking China out. Tell us what you think about this summit, what it means for America and America's security.
President Trump, to put it plainly, has realigned the world order.
Yes.
You are exactly right. The China Belt and Road Initiative, he has dismantled that. That's a big part of what we're watching now. I mean, 2 months ago was Maduro. And now here we are in Iran and putting China on their heels and squeezing them and their ability to get energy and breaking apart this horrific alliance between Iran and Russia and China piece by piece. He is achieving a world order that has isolated Iran and allowed us to strike Iran, but in turn is now isolating China. I never thought we would see this day, and to have done this in just over a year, it's incredibly impressive, and it's worth remembering. Trump 1 set the foundation for what you're looking at here in Trump 2.
Very few people remember that. And when you look at Iran, the Abraham Accords are the reason that things are playing out as successfully as they are right now there. Back to the Central and South America, there are holdouts, places like Mexico and obviously Cuba, which appears to be on the brink of
Nicaragua.
Yeah. So what happens? What are the incentives for those countries to actually begin to get more in line with their neighbors?
Well, the projection of American strength. The projection of American strength moves mountains, and we have seen that. And I'm very intrigued, and I know you've been speaking about this, Rachel, the Cuba announcement, that something is going to change in Cuba. And I don't think that happens but for Maduro, and I don't think that happens but for Iran. American strength moves diplomacy. And just look at Mexico and Trump 1. When Trump said, you know, I'm going to place tariffs on you unless you get this immigration situation under control. What did Mexico do? They sent their own troops to their northern border. So this is a businessman. The things he says are strategic and for a reason. And don't underestimate that in American strength and what it can do.
And the cartel component is huge. You know, there's a reason why, you know, cartels don't, you know, occupy states or parts of states in the United States. And President Bukele will be the first to tell you the reason that happens is when the cartels are run, which happens in Latin America, when the cartels actually are in bed with the government. And this is a huge issue in Latin America, and the citizens are rising up in places like Mexico saying, we don't want to be a narco state anymore. And the pressure is not just on Sheinbaum with the tariffs, but he's allowed enough space by doing what he's been doing at the border and cutting off the funds from the cartels, the people in Mexico are starting to rise up and demand more from their government. So it's not just Trump putting pressure, but he's allowed space for the people now to put pressure on the government. I think if there was election today, Sheinbaum would not win. Now, unfortunately, I think she has like 4 more years left. But it is interesting what's happening.
It is. I had family members recently, I believe they were in Argentina, and they said that there were people there saying that they know people who are naming their babies Rubio now because they are so proud of what this administration is achieving.
Which would be blonde.
Yes, there you go, there you go. And Kristi
Blondie.
Noem, Blondie, yes. Well, Kristi Noem, I would note, you know, of course, she's taking this new position with Shield of America. She said that there's going to be a big agreement, and it's going to be on drug trafficking and cartels. So I think we'll expect a deliverable from President Trump.
Well, it probably so. And, you know, walk me through, Kayleigh, the significance of this actual summit that the president has actually put together, because when I traveled to Panama for the Panama Canal story, when we first heard he was going to try and take back the Panama Canal, that was ultimately geared towards blunting China's influence. Rachel talked a little bit about the Chinese influence, but it was fascinating to me because when I was there talking to the Panamanian leaders, they said, hey, we've been ignored by previous American administrations for years, going back Republican and Democrats. And when you go down that rabbit hole a little bit, you learn that really China was capitalizing on our absence and getting involved. And it went on for decades. And now President Trump, under what many call this Donroe Doctrine, see that this needs to be, turned around, eradicated. And so this summit really is quite significant, as Rachel pointed out, historically, because many of these leaders, I would surmise, may finally feel like they've got an American president that has a vested interest, that wants to be present and be involved.
Without question. I mean, remember, it was supposed to be the Summit of Americas, which changed then to now the Shield of Americas. And you see these like-minded leaders aggregating. And I know Mexico's watching this, and I know Brazil's watching this, and I think you're going to see change from them. And it reminds me of the Board of Peace in the Middle East, and more broadly, the world. You saw some European leaders say, oh, we don't want to be a part of this. This competes with the United Nations. But President Trump put this together, and it squeezes these leaders and pushes them and pressures them. And I think ultimately you see some of these leaders come around, much in the way we have seen finally and reluctantly the United Kingdom, let's say, come around.
What's interesting, too, that you bring that point up about how something like Shield of America could replace the UN is, you know, the UN would impose a lot of globalist sort of mandates on these countries. And our own State Department was going into Latin America and saying, you have to do this with climate and abortion and LGBTQ. And that's what our government was saying these countries needed to do in order to have a relationship with us. And these are very conservative, mostly Catholic countries. And they were frustrated. President Trump has come in and said, we want commerce with you. And they would prefer to have commerce with us than the Chinese, who just go into like Africa and colonize. And that's what they were doing in Latin America. They were colonizing, Latin America, and it was not what they wanted, but they didn't have a partner in America. That is all changed. This is fascinating what's happening.
It is. And I mean, it reminds me of the border czar, Kamala Harris, had this grand idea to end immigration, and it was to inject money into these countries and just throw money, and somehow that would stymie the flow of immigration.
More
because
NGOs.
people would be happy in their dictatorships. Well, that turned out not to work, turned out not to be the case, and it's an entirely different approach.
So we now have them gathering for their picture. There's Monica Crowley organizing everybody in line to get their picture with the president.
Yeah.
You know, it is interesting to think about all of this playing out while this operation in Iran is going down. And, the big picture effort, strategy by the Trump administration, their thinking is that if you can deal with Iran and remove the threat of Iran and get those Abraham Accords back on track, then it allows the United States of America to hand control of the Middle East over to partners who believe in peace and commerce as opposed to terrorism and chaos, and completely turn the attention back to our own hemisphere.
That's right. And as you noted, we saw the groundwork for that with the Abraham Accords, with Bahrain and the UAE coming together, and then quickly you had Morocco follow. And now you see the president, it's interesting this morning, broadcasting, I think strategically, a strategy. Like he says this morning, Iran has apologized and surrendered to its Middle East neighbors. Then you go down the Truth Social and he says, and today Iran will be hit very hard. There is strategy to this. And I've got to say, it's impressive to have a president who wakes up in the morning, sets the Iran strategy, goes to a Latin America summit, and then goes to the most solemn movement any president could be a part of, and that is the dignified transfer.
And as you know, this is a guy who never stops pushing. Push, 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 push. Because and you can only do that if you have a short range and long range vision of where you want to push this.
And really seeing the opportunity. I mean, so many of these countries have just within the last year and a half elected conservative, right-leaning, Trump-allied leaders. And so the opportunity was now, and he had to show that. And that's why the capture of Maduro was so important, because Venezuela was sort of the gateway for China, the gateway for Iran. He's now taking control of that. And I think a lot of these leaders are now looking for the next steps there in Venezuela. We have an interim dictator, really, in Delcy Rodriguez. And President Trump is stabilizing that and certainly needs to do that, especially while we're in this war. But I would imagine, as you see all of these leaders lined up, a lot of them are going to have questions about what's next in Venezuela. And then, as you astutely bring up, Cuba. Cuba is on the verge of collapsing, and that will also change the entire playbook here.
Yeah, you've got a winning strategy in these countries exactly looking and saying, what do I want to be a part of? Winning, thriving American democracy, or these failed dictatorships that don't particularly end well? And you mentioned, I heard you this morning, Bolivia last fall. That's a great example of a country that changed course.
And Chile just now elected, by the way, a Catholic with 9 children.
So
man after my own heart.
Let me ask you this, because this used to be your department, and that is messaging. And you got a good show coming up. I want to get a promo for Saturday in America, but you may carry the president's speech, which we expect to be maybe in the next hour or so. We're not exactly sure of the timing. We lost the shot there. That was the photo. Next, maybe the address. Is the president going to speak not as much to the American audience that'll be watching, but also to the audience of the citizens of the countries represented there?
Absolutely. I think there are a number of audiences. He knows Iran and their allies are watching. There will be a message absolutely to these other players, the Europeans who are watching, and some tepidly stepping into this or staying back or perhaps obstinate. But I think the big audience is the American public, and they're looking at gas prices. And this is a perfect opportunity to say, look at what I've done in Venezuela. There's $2 billion we've had in transactions with oil. They have some of the biggest oil reserves in the world. And I've changed the dynamic. And there's some short-term pain, yes, but we've got some long-term gain coming. And trust me as a businessman to bring that. And this is the perfect venue to do that.
Who else you got coming up?
So we have former Vice President Mike Pence, who's very supportive on the president's Iran decision. We have General Petraeus, General Jack Keane, Senator Mike Lee. It's week 8. We still don't have the Save America Act. It just befuddles me, among many others. And Henry Clay, one of 4 Democrats, to vote and say, nope, you're not stripping the president of his war powers with the War Powers Act.
What a great lineup.
Thank you.
We just showed a tweet of him in the last hour talking about the hypocrisy of Democrats who were for the standing up to Iran, but now are against President Trump taking that action.
He has quite a few thoughts on that, and I look forward to having him on.
All right, tune in. Coming up in just about 30 minutes.
Thanks,
Kayleigh.
Thank you. You got it.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.